Okay, everyone. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Apologies for the slight delay. We were just sorting out some technical difficulties. We are now getting ready for our final panel of the conference. So, congratulations to those of you who've been here since yesterday morning. You've almost made it. The end is in sight. I imagine there'll be some mixed feelings there. So our last panel of the day and last panel of the conference, panel number 6, Paths to God, is commencing now. So if I could ask everyone to kindly return to their seats. You know, once again, you know, I think the sisters are ahead of the brothers in this regard.
We're always ahead of the brothers.
Did you hear that, guys? They're always ahead of the brothers. Oh no, the brothers are catching up quickly, though. I don't know. It's neck and neck. Panel 6, Paths to God. I think this is a really important question because so far we've covered so many different topics. So, you know, yesterday we looked at technologies of faith, we looked at theology and history, and we looked at faith-based activism. And we looked at God and society, theism and atheism. We've covered all of these different, different questions revolving around God and modernity. How do we understand God in the modern world? How do we live godly lives in the modern world? And what are the challenges we face as theists, as Muslims and as Shia? Now we turn to a really interesting panel though, Paths to God. How do we find God in the modern world? How do we do that? Like, what are the different ways of knowing God directly? And this is something that all three of the papers in this panel, you know, are speaking to. And so again, there's going to be a slight change to the running order. We're going to start with Sheikh Rizwan Rashid, who is going to talk about entropy in the modern world and the persisting paths to God, which sounds very philosophical. He'll be followed by Dr. Sayyid Zaidi, who will be taking us on sort of a more classical approach, showcasing the Brethren of Purity's conception of God. And we're going to end with another local Torontoite, if I can use the term. Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza is going to be discussing the incomprehensible God of Abraham and the new agnostics. So we've already met the new atheists, but who are the new agnostics? Stay tuned to find out. Chairing this panel, very kindly, is Dr. Nabil Hussain of Panel 5 fame. So if I could invite Dr. Nabil to come up to the podium. And could we all welcome him, please, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, guys, so I knew yesterday I said that was the most pathetic salawat I'd ever heard. But I think Dar es Salaam are going to withdraw their validation for your salawat. So can we please welcome Professor Nabil Hussain with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What do you think? Can we accept that? We can accept it? Okay, we'll accept it.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our final panel. We'll start off with a presentation from Sheikh Rizwan Rashid, who was born and raised in the West, who began his career as a teacher before earning a Master of Education from the University of Toronto. He is currently holds the position of director and teacher at Jamia Al-Ilmiya, an Islamic educational institution where he nurtures the intellectual and spiritual growth of students while promoting Islamic scholarship and education. He has translated several works of Ayatollah Jawadi, including On the Journey Towards Understanding the Quran. His presentation is entitled Entropy in the Modern World and the Persisting Paths to God. Please welcome him with a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل My dear scholars, elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, I'd like to begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for bringing us together to contemplate over the gift of Islam and to go over the beautiful verses of guidance that He has sent down to us. The topic that I will be touching in today's presentation is called Entropy in the Modern World and the Persisting Paths to God. It is a topic that elicits both fear and hope. Fear because it implies that we live in an entropic world, in a world that is becoming more entropic, a world of natural, social, and civilizational decay and destruction, but also hope, because it suggests that the paths that emanate from God will necessarily persist through the entropic conditions, though they may require us to transcend our own entropic nature in order to locate them. And just to quote Ayatollah Jawadi, basically it would require us to go beyond the spatial and temporal conditions that we find ourselves in. I'm not quite sure how to access the presentation, so if I can get some assistance with that. Okay, alhamdulillah. So our discussion now is not about the technical definition of entropy as studied in the field of thermodynamics, though I'm sure there's some very interesting parallels and connections that can be made with that particular definition. Our discussion is about the general notion of entropy, which seems to highlight three particular aspects. So the first is the idea of decay or disintegration. The second, the idea of disorder or chaos. So the first has to do with this kind of internal integrity of each entity, and the second has to do with its place in relation to other entities. The third aspect is about doubt or uncertainty. Now, decay in Arabic could potentially be translated as fasad or naqs or khusran. It is when the internal integrity of an item is compromised. It's when it leaves its state of salama or its state of perfection or kamal. It is when, for example, an apple begins to rot, or when, for example, we lose certain faculties that we generally take for granted and that we have been blessed with. Now, disorder, the second aspect, could potentially be translated as tafawut, or ithtirab, or fitna. And it's basically when things lose their proper place, they go out of control. They become more random in relation to everything around them. And this, for example, is best exemplified by the increase in wars, in civil unrest, in natural calamities and disasters, and in other such phenomena. The third now is doubt, which perhaps could be best conveyed by the words shak, or dhann, or raib, or if we were to use the terms that Ayatollah Jawadi did in the morning, jahal or jahala. And basically, it is to depict when things become obscure or partial, when we're not able to see things clearly. And it is best represented by, for example, misinformation or disinformation or superficiality, which has become prevalent. So all of these aspects now are subsumed under that general term of entropy. Now, when we talk about entropy in the modern world, therefore, we're talking about an increase in decay, an increase in disorder, and an increase in doubt around us. What is important to keep in mind, however, is that entropy is a metaphysical necessity in the creative order, one. And two, it manifests itself over time, both within the human being and also within civilizations. So the first thing, it is a metaphysical necessity for the sheer fact that the creative order must, by necessity, be imperfect in relation to God, insofar as the creative order is other than God and an effect. It must be dependent on the cause and hence less than the cause. In the face of the absolute, which is the all-perfect, all things that are not the absolute must hence be characterized by decay or disorder or doubt. And one of the most important qualities of an entropic reality then is its impermanence, unlike the absolute, which is always there, which is permanent. Hence the verse from the Quran, from Surah Rahman, Kullu man alayha fan. All things that are upon it, upon the earth, is perishing, is ephemeral. Hence, anything that is time-bound, anything that has an ajal determined for it, can in this sense be seen to be entropic, even though it may simultaneously also be qualified by truth, and we'll try to get to that as well. So the verse from the Quran again, مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَأَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى. There is not a single thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create the heavens or the earth or anything between the two, except that it has two qualities. One, it has the quality of truth that allows it to persist, but two, it has an ajal. It has a time period, which is basically that entropic reality of it. Moreover, if reality is hierarchically ordered, then the closer we get to the lower realms of reality, the realms of the dunya, for example, the greater the degree of entropy. In his Anwar al-Hikmah, the philosopher and scholar Faiz Kashani states the following. He says, the closer a being is to its source, the closer it will be to simplicity, basata, oneness, wahda, nobility, sharafa, and self-sufficiency, ghina. And the further will it be from differentiation, ikhtilaf, composition, tarakkub, and indigence, iftikar. Now to this list, we can add the list that we just said right now, that the further an entity is from the higher realms, from its source, the greater will be the degree of its decay, its disorder, and its doubt. Hence, if matter and materiality is to be considered the most limited instantiations of reality, and hence furthest away from the divine, the more that we gravitate towards materiality in the world, the greater the entropy that will be manifest in it. In his Crisis of the Modern World, René Guénon states the following: these are the natural and inevitable results of an ever more pronounced materialization, for matter is essentially multiplicity and division. And this, be it said in passing, is why all that proceeds from matter can beget only strife and all manner of conflicts between people as between individuals. The deeper one sinks into matter, the more the elements of division and opposition gain force and scope. And contrariwise, the more one rises towards pure spirituality, the nearer one approaches the unity which can only be fully realized by consciousness of universal principles. Now, apart from entropy being a metaphysical reality within the creative order, and especially apparent in its lower forms, it is also a fundamental reality of man himself, especially in relation to time. As we read in Surah Asr, wal Asr, innal insana lafi khusr. By time, truly man is indeed in loss, in decline. This is an essential characteristic of man on earth. It is the default. Left to himself, man will be in loss. If only he adheres to the exceptions that appear in the same chapter, then that's his way of escaping that natural tendency towards entropy. Finally, we have entropy within the duration of history, of historical time as well, and within civilizations. In some of the ancient and classical civilizations, such as the Hindu tradition or the Greco-Roman tradition, the conception of time was not linear and progressive as the 18th century philosophers attempted to promote, right? And that cannot be our point of departure, as Sheikh Vinay was talking about. Rather, the way that they conceived of time was one that was cyclical and digressive, tending towards decay, tending towards destruction. The Hindu text, for example, spoke of a yuga cycle represented by a bull, where each successive stage would see the loss of a limb. So in the first stage, the bull has all 4 limbs. In the next stage, one of the limbs is taken away and now has 3 limbs. In the next stage, it has now 2 limbs. And in each successive state, the imbalance now that is there in the world is increasing more and more. The Greek text spoke of the ages of man, which began with the Golden Age and devolved into silver and iron and bronze ages, and the last one being characterized by human beings who were warlike, who were greedy and impious. Now, our own tradition does speak of the Akhir az-Zaman, and we have many ahadith that speak about the conditions of the Akhir az-Zaman. And I have just one there where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, is reported to have said that the hour, the final hour, will not arise until the world will permeate with dhulm and udwan, with injustice, things being out of place, and enmity in this kind of competition, this negative competition. One of the characteristics that René Guénon speaks about regarding the modern world is the prevalence of action over contemplation. He states the following. He says, absorbed by action to the point of denying everything that lies beyond it, they do not see that this action itself degenerates from the absence of any principle into an agitation as vain as it is sterile. This indeed is the most conspicuous feature of the modern period. Need for ceaseless agitation, for unending change, and for ever increasing speed, matching the speed with which events themselves succeed one another. It is a dispersion in multiplicity, and in a multiplicity that is no longer unified by consciousness of any higher principle. So by now, it should be clear that entropy is an inescapable reality for us, implanted into the creative order and manifesting itself in greater and greater degrees within the individual and collective lives of human beings over the course of time. Now, this is not to deny, as we mentioned before, the truth that also exists within the creative order. وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بِالْحَقِّ. Right? So we have that phenomena as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth with truth. And so all things now exemplify these two realities. One reality that is turned towards God, the truth, al-haq, and the other that is turned away from God, which is represented by its entropic nature. This is also not to deny, by the way, the fitra that also exists within each and every one of us, right? That which is what actually allows us to transcend our material limitations. Okay? But what it does do is acknowledge that over the course of time, when the dunya becomes the extent of our knowledge and hence our ambition, the entropic reality of the creative order will manifest itself even more. Okay, so the real question now that we want to ask is, how do these entropic tendencies affect the paths towards God? Now, the Quran mentions two categories of paths towards God, and this is just one categorization, one classification we have of the paths towards God. And in a brilliant work of Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli called Tawheed dar Quran, Tawheed in light of the Quran, from the perspective of the Quran, he breaks down, he kind of separates the different paths towards God into these two paths, and later we will add one more path to it. So the two paths are from Surah Fussilat, verse 53. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. That surely soon we will show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves until it is clear that He is the real. Now the word ayah, and its plural, is one of the most oft repeated words in the Quran, indicating the importance behind it. The ayat, or the signs, they're not destinations, rather they're pathways emerging from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leading to Him. So the Quran now divides these paths into two categories, the pathway of the horizons and the pathway of the souls. The first is the path of the horizons, which is to observe the signs outside of man and to use them to direct him towards understanding the divine. And these include all of the cosmic phenomena all around us. And for the sake of saving time, I will, inshallah, we have the verse here. But basically, there are many verses in the Quran that speak about how a lot of the natural phenomena that we see around us, that we used to see a lot more of before, are basically pathways to God. The question then is, how have entropic conditions affected this group of paths? In light of modern man's assault on the natural world, deforestation, destruction of habitats, urbanization, we heard some beautiful examples that were offered by Sheikh Subhani with regards to certain animals, for example, exemplifying order and purpose. But when now their habitats are being destroyed, when they're being eliminated as a species, to what extent now are those signs being lost? And we also see man's simultaneous obsession over his own conventionally created worlds, and conventionally created either socially conventional worlds or artificial worlds as well. So hence man's access to, his dependency on, and his exposure to these celestial and temporal signs have been reduced. Yes, they exist amongst the few, those who are still kind of searching, those who are in the field, those scientists, for example, that are looking at these signs firsthand. They're still there for them, but for the majority of us, these signs are starting to be eclipsed. Hence, when the Quran gives an example of a path of the horizon by stating, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةً إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَا, had there been any gods in them other than Allah in the heavens and the earth, the heavens and the earth, would surely have become corrupted. When the average person now looks out to the heaven and the earth at the level of his own interaction, and he finds that within his own ecosphere, it has in fact become corrupted through the hands of man, it does not hence lead him to a realization of God's singular creatorship or God's singular lordship. Rather, if anything, it affirms the multiplicity of the homo deuses who have used that gift of free will to create havoc on the planet, as the verse in the Quran suggests and confirms as well. So that's with regards to the paths that have to do with the horizons. What about the paths that have to do with the souls? Well, here too, we have a similar situation. The Quran tells us to contemplate within ourselves, but we notice more and more that because of various actions of our own doing, we are getting less and less in touch with ourselves as Ayatollah Jawadi mentioned in the beginning, we are getting to a state where we are forgetting ourselves. We have reconceptualized ourselves or reconstructed ourselves to the point where we no longer know what it means to look within ourselves. So it's true then that we are kind of flooded now in this entropic time, and this obviously paints a very dismal picture, but there is hope as well, as the Quran has told us, and as Ayatollah Jawadi also mentioned as well. So it is true that kullu man alayha fan, but it is also true, وَيَبْكَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. So insofar as these paths now, right, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا, insofar as these paths are linked directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they must, out of necessity, also persist. And we don't have time to go into what does that actually look like with regards to the paths of the horizons. What does a path of the horizon look like in entropic conditions? What does a path of the soul look like in entropic conditions? But this is something that I think is very important to study and to look for. What I just want to end off with, inshallah, is that we started off with two paths based on verse 53 of Surah Fussilat, but there's a last part which alludes to that last path, the third of two paths. أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. Is it not sufficient that your Lord is witnessed above all things? And again, going back to Sheikh Subhani's talk, when he mentioned Dua Arafah, that is very clearly the third path. This path, according to Ayatollah Jawadi, it's the most difficult to traverse, but the closest to us. The question, though, is do the entropic conditions of the present times, does it affect this path in the same way that it affected those two other paths, the paths of the horizons and the path of the souls? The answer must be no, because this path is so embedded in reality that it is inaccessible to the very process of entropy. It is the realization that God is reality, that there is nothing before God that can take us to Him. But not only is this path not affected by entropy, one can argue that it is actually more appreciated in entropic conditions. How is that? Well, in entropic times, truth, goodness, beauty, they begin to be undermined. Truth is considered meaningless in a post-truth world. Without truth, there's no yardstick for goodness or for beauty. Aesthetics, as we've heard from some speakers, ethics becomes instrumental. Aesthetic becomes a matter of taste. The problem is that we cannot let go of truth itself. So from one point of view, the more that truth is assaulted, the more that truth is actually attacked, the greater our appreciation of the truth itself. In our effort to deny and doubt the relative truth of all things, we are left with the bedrock of truth itself. And I'm going to end with one analogy. Just imagine that there are these lines we see in front of us right now, and imagine that I want to erase these lines. And so I try to erase them, and I can't erase them. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe if I start digging, I'll be able to erase them. And so I start digging and digging. And as I'm digging, I realize that these lines actually go further and further down. And to the point, I start digging to the point where there's nothing left to dig. I've actually dug up everything. I've hit bedrock. My shovel breaks at bedrock. And that's when I get to this realization that one cannot deny truth. To deny truth is to affirm truth. And that basically is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That reality is God. And I'll end with the verse, Shahidallahu annahu la ilaha illahu. Allah bears witness that there is no God except Him. Allah's own reality is the most persisting path to Him. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be able to access these paths during these entropic times and to be able to reach the oneness of His Lordship. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin.
Thank you very much, Shaykhuna. Our next speaker is Dr. Sayed Zaidi, who received his PhD from Emory University in 2023 and is now a lecturer at Fordham University's theology department. He is working on several books right now, and he is quite prolific in his articles that he has written. The first book that he's working on is on the philosophy of the Brethren of Purity, or the Ikhwan as-Sifa. The second is on the history of Hermetic thought from the late antique period to the 10th century. Please welcome him with your loudest of salawat as he begins his presentation on the Brethren of Purity's conception of God.
I know what slide it's on. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, particularly the ICAIR organization, Sheikh Khalili, and everyone else. The Brethren of Purity were an eclectic secret Shiite group that existed in Basra, Iraq from 870 to 950. One of the most unique elements of Basra throughout their existence was that several Shiite imams lived or passed through Basra. We do not know much about the group's members. However, we know that they wrote 51 treatises, ranging from arithmetic and geometry to magic. They wrote 51 treatises in honor of the fact that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam prayed 51 units of prayers, zakat, every day. They covered almost every major science that was studied during their time, and they made clear that they found the best experts of the field that they studied. The Brethren's approach to the treatises were unique in that they saw every science as simultaneously philosophical, theological, spiritual, and scientific. In other words, they possess a unique theology of arithmetic, which they applied to their conception of philosophy. This gave them a specialized approach to the sciences that was holistic and comprehensive at the same time. Most importantly, they were a group that saw themselves as Shiite Muslims in every sense of the term. In this presentation, I will first show how a philosophical group who claimed and believed that philosophy and Islam are inherently compatible with each other first employs the word of God, Al-Quran al-Kareem, in almost every aspect of their discourse. Then I will show how their Shiite beliefs influence their approach to philosophy. Finally, I address their own particular conception of God. The Brethren begin their treatise on arithmetic in the following way. Praise be to God who created, then fashioned, who measured out, then guided, and who brought forth pasture, then made it as blackened stubble. We shall teach thee to recite, that thou wilt not forget, save what God wills. Truly he knows that which is open and that which is hidden. And we shall see thy way unto ease. So remind, should the reminder benefit, he who fears will remember, while the most wretched shall avoid it. He who enters into the greatest fire, then neither dies therein nor lives. He indeed prospers who is purified, remembers the name of his Lord, and prays. Nay, but ye prefer the life of this world, while the hereafter is better and more enduring. Truly, this is in the scriptures of old, the scriptures of Abraham and Moses. Praise be to God, who is the first, who cannot be blocked, and there is no God but he, the first and the last. Praise be to God, who guided us onto this. We should not have been rightly guided had not God guided us. The initial citation of the Quran for this treatise on arithmetic may seem surprising. However, a careful examination of the verses show us why they chose them. The Brethren's first treatise deals with arithmetic. That is the counting, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing of Numbers. It deals with how God created a perfect universe through the mediation of the universal intellect, universal soul, and prime matter. The brethren argue that the reality of God is present within all of us in the same way that our noble prophet once said, God is closer to us than our jugular vein, and that the heart of the believer is the throne of the merciful. Qalb al-mu'min arsh ar-Rahman. The first verses that the brethren cite here is, praise be to God who created, then fashioned, who measured out, then guided, and who brought forth pasture, then made it as blackened stubble. In this verse, the brethren explain that God tells us about the process of creation from his throne until the world of generation and creation, corruption. In the following verses, God says, we shall teach thee to recite, that thou wilt not forget, save what God wills. Truly he knows that which is open and that which is hidden. The brethren now show God's epistemological and pedagogical agency in the lives of human beings. As I mentioned earlier, the brethren wrote 51 treatises on all of the sciences of the day. The brethren here are claiming that their knowledge is not one which came from teachers alone, but the direct intervention and inspiration of God himself. The brethren begin almost every other line with the following statement. Know, O brother, may God provide us and him with a spirit from him. A'lam ayyuhal akhi ayyudukallahu wa iyana biruhu minhu. The reason why the brethren begin their paragraphs with this praise is to show their constant need that we have in order to learn. Even when the brethren state that their knowledge of a certain idea or science was derived from a school or individual, they make clear that that derived knowledge was only possible through the light of God. You might also want to know that Plato, Hermes Trismegistus, and other ancient Greek philosophers who the Muslim knew well about and saw themselves in debt to, used to also begin their treatises with the same exact line I just said. The reason why the brethren cites the sentence, truly he knows that which is open and that which is hidden, from the Quran is not only to make clear that God has not unveiled all of his knowledge to us, but to show us that God has complete knowledge of everything that has been revealed. The brethren are anticipating the famous debate that Sheikh al-Rais, Hujjatul Haq ibn Sina, and Ghazali will have in the 11th century, where Sheikh al-Rais argued that God knows everything regarding an object at the moment that he created it. He knows its capabilities. He knows where it will go, what it will eat, when and where it will sleep, when it will become skinny or fat, everything. Ghazali disagreed with him and instead argued that God must know universals and particulars. In other words, God must know everything that happens on earth as it is happening and should not have to know things in a universal manner. The brethren and yours truly completely disagree with Ghazali on this particular topic. God must know everything about his creation when he creates it. It is not like a parent who learns about his or her child as it is growing up. God is all-knowing at the point when he creates that reality. Otherwise, he would not be all-knowing. Al-Alim and all-aware. Al-Khabir. The chapter then moves to address spiritual actions and decisions of the human being. The brethren cites these verses and comments on it by emphasizing certain hadiths which reflect their philosophical worldviews. First, they want readers to know that God has given human beings his most important quality and gift, free will. Human beings are the only creatures of God that can rebel against him and can do wrong. When you see a bird flying south in the fall, this is due nothing more than the will of God as he created it. When you find a roach in your bathroom, that roach is not doing evil. Its very existence is to annoy and scare the living daylights out of you, and perhaps remind you of God's ability to scare us even through the smallest of things. That was one of the lessons of the coronavirus pandemic that none of us learned, unfortunately. Otherwise, our hearts would not have become more hardened. The brethren then cites verses that reminds us not only of heaven and hell, but the nature of them. The brethren often cited famous hadith, heaven is in the skies and hell is on earth. The brethren subscribed to a worldview that was first created by the Hellenistic philosopher Plotinus, adopted by the Muslims in the 8th century, employed by the brethren, and later re-accepted by Sadr al-Mutahallihin, Mullah Sadra. This was a worldview where God creates a reality called the universal intellect, which possesses Platonic forms. I do not have the time to explain the nature of the Platonic forms. Moving forward, the universal soul then creates the world. The universal intellect then creates the universal soul, which then governs the world. Now the brethren argue that heaven is the realm of the universal soul, whereas hell is the earth. Those who want to go to heaven must live an ethical, upright life, which is based on spiritual contemplation and practice. As the Quranic verse states above, in order to acquire salvation, one must remain pure and keep the name of God in his and her own chest. If you don't, as the verse says, you will remain in hell that this world actually is, instead of moving to the more enduring world of heaven. The Brethren of Purity identified themselves as a Shiite Muslim group. The 3rd chapter of the 48 treatise, entitled A Call to God, begins with the following statement, I quote, I rely on the living, the self-subsisting, the benefactor. No slumber can seize him, and who is of all things, knowing and who has power over all things. No vision can grasp him, but his vision is over all vision. He is all comprehension, yet is acquainted with all things. Blessings of God be on the Prophet Muhammad, the seal of all prophets, on Ali ibn Abi Talib, the best of legatees, wasi, on God's angels who have been close to him, on the messengers, on his worshipers who do good, and on all the loyal people in the heavens and on the earth, of the faithful and the Muslims and those of you who are subject to his mercy. The Brethren of Purity's mention of Ali ibn Abi Talib makes clear that they hold him to be the most excellent and preferred al-afdal of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. The Brethren write that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was the first male companion to join the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Brethren often call Ali ibn Abi Talib the Lion of God on earth. The Brethren emphasize Ali's knowledge, and the knowledge that he possesses cannot be overemphasized. Later on in the treatise, the Brethren write as follows, I quote, among what has gathered you and us together, O brothers, is the love of the household of our Prophet, who are the pure ones, and the walaya of the Lion of God on earth, the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Talib, the best of the legatees. May the blessings of God be upon him. And what has gathered you and us together, as demanded by the reverence of manners, is to leave the group of the common people, the awam, and to follow Ali's steps and path, and to indicate that to him. We have sent to you one of our brothers, whose insight we have admired, with whose ways of action we have been pleased, in his religion and manners. And you, may God aid you, appreciate and know what is required to revere him. You should try to make him close to you in privacy. When your heart is unburdened, you should listen to what he says to you, and you will hear from him what we have conveyed to him of our secrets, and what we have hinted to him about our knowledge, so we can explain to you our school, and you will understand our belief, both in the matter of religion and this matter. The passage above is one of the Brethren's most explicit statements regarding Shiism. First, they make clear that their spiritual allegiance is to Imam Ali. Then they make clear that the concept of walaya and wilaya is a precondition for any affiliation to them. This term comes from the Arabic trilateral root walaya, which means to be near or close. Regarding this term, Vincent J. Cornell writes, waliullah, the compound word most often translated as saint, in English means an intimate or a friend of God. But the actual use of an expression does not always correspond to etymological ideals. I'm going to skip this very long quote on walaya for another day. If any of you are interested, you can always speak to me about it later. However, The brethren are arguing that Imam Ali was the closest companion of the Prophet, his spiritual successor, a friend or intimate of God, a deputy and representative of God on earth, his chief legislator on earth, and the defender of God's laws on earth. Since Imam Ali possesses these earthly characteristics, his spiritual place in the unseen world is equally important. Also of importance is the fact that the brethren in purity make close that love of the household of our Prophet is paramount to their followers' success. What this implies is that the brethren in purity emphasize the primacy of the love of the Prophet Muhammad's family and the necessity to be spiritually and intellectually aligned to what they believed. In line with these statements, the brethren call themselves Shia throughout their treatises and mention in other treatises that they are to be considered Shia. Another key element of Shiism is their exclusivity. They call on their followers to leave the group of the common people, the Awam, and to follow Imam Ali and to indicate that to him. The brethren argue that the knowledge they possess comes directly from the walaya of Imam Ali. While the brethren have made clear that the walaya of Imam Ali is paramount to being a part of their elite group, and they have defined themselves as Shia, the brethren describe the Shiites as, I quote, an elite, intelligent, faithful, learned group, an excellent group. They describe the Shiites as follows. I quote, learned people who know the affairs of the religious and the secrets of prophethood and are well versed in the preparatory sciences. If you meet one of them and take into your confidence, give him the good tidings that will please him, and tell him of the approach of the period of unveiling and awakening, and tell him of the end of the period of sleep. It is the beginning of the state of the people of goodness in this land and the removal of distress. End quote. The brethren describe Shiites as an elite and excellent group who they describe as people who will bring goodness in distress by means of knowledge and contemplation and practice of the knowledge they found. The brethren of purity's first mention of God is in their first treatise on arithmetic. Here they state the relationship of the Creator, exalted be his praise, to all existent beings is like the relationship of the unit 1 to other numbers. This is a direct reflection of the Pythagorean principle of the monad's participation in all subsequent numbers addressed above. However, it is also a reflection of Plotinus and Proclus's argument that the influence and presence of the first cause can always be found in all subsequent existences. In their 11th treatise, the brethren call God, I quote, the first cause, namely the Creator and the exalted, and state that God is present in every subsequent cause. The brethren implies a very intimate relationship between God and his servants, which may imply close proximity with him either before or after death. In the following passage, the brethren of purity compare the world to a race course, Maidan. They say, bodies are noble steeds. The souls racing ahead to do good deeds are fleeting riders, and God is the magnanimous king who bestows rewards. If the rider who comes ahead when he reaches the king's gates does not dismount from his horse, he cannot come into the king's presence, and he forgoes his reward, his robe of honor, and token of esteem. And it goes on, as you can read. The brethren's comparison of God to a king and souls to the riders of a bodily steed, and the arrival of these souls at the gate of the king is reminiscent of the welcome of heavenly souls in the court of the king. This makes good sense, as the brethren's eschatological beliefs is as follows. During the greater resurrection, the individual souls that have died and reascended to heaven will join the universal soul, which will then return to God. And those who do not rise up to heaven and join the universal soul will then perish completely. Unlike their peripatetic contemporaries, namely Al-Kindi and Farabi, the brethren always mention the name of God with the pious expressions exalted or blessed and exalted. This demonstrates the religious nature of their conception of God. Unlike Farabi, the brethren are not interested in simply showing how God is a necessary being who's responsible for all subsequent creations. The brethren begin each of their treatises with the conventional Basmallah, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, careful with almost every major or minor philosophical or scientific point. They cite the need for God's help. They cite the Quran and the presence of God in all the studies they overtake. In the interest of time, I'm going to move to my conclusion. We now see how the Brethren of Purity's conception of God can be seen as a reflection of both Quranic and philosophical sources. The Brethren of Purity does not argue that God is an unmoved mover or simply an intellect, as Aristotle and other people argues. Instead, God is the main force behind all creation, who directly and indirectly maintains all creation, and God does not possess attributes that are reflective of that are reflected in both Quranic and philosophical beliefs. You might ask why I decided to present on a 9th century group. It is not simply because I spent a decade studying them. It is because of 3 other reasons. First, their spiritual, religious, and scientific worldviews were instrumental for everyone that came after them. Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina read them. Al-Ghazali was once accused of being the author of their works. They are all over Ibn Arabi's works. Mullah Sadra even begins his letters with a line that they use to introduce each other. Know, O brother, may God provide you and us with a spirit from him. Therefore, the entirety of the Islamic intellectual tradition owes a great debt to the secret Shiite group that is barely getting the proper attention they deserved. Second, they were responsible for transmitting and appropriating Greek wisdom in a way that became acceptable for everyone mentioned above. If it was not for the Brethren of Purity, later Muslim thinkers might not have seen Greek philosophers as they did. Finally, and most importantly, their approach to the Quran, to Shiite Islam, and God is extremely relevant to the problems we are having today. Just look at the current scientific crises we are having, where Muslims pray 5 times a day and accidentally subscribe to a system of Darwinian evolution. Or we cannot distinguish between using technology as a tool, or which is an extension of the arm, or a complete replacement of our God-given intellects. As Shiite Muslims, we are now asking ourselves how we can continue to bridge the mosque, the seminaries, the businesses, politics, arts, and our private lives. I do not have the time here, but I can assure you that the Brethren had a vision that can be modified and adopted for the modern era. Finally, the Brethren's approach to God was adopted by almost every major philosopher, including Mullah Sadra. This is because they were able to properly reconcile the issue of God's transcendence and immanence. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much, Sayyid Zaidi. Our next speaker is Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza, who was born in Pakistan and raised in Canada. He graduated from the University of Toronto with a bachelor's degree in physics and computer science. After working as an engineer for a short period, he traveled to study at the House of Qom. He continues to study advanced jurisprudence, or Bahth al-Kharij with Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, and Islamic philosophy and Irfan with the Ayatollah's senior student. 10 years ago, he initiated a pre-Hawza program called the Primer Course in Traditional Islamic Sciences in Toronto. 6 years ago, he, along with other senior students and scholars from the West, established the first Hawza school in Qom for students from the West, called the School of Islamic and Occidental Studies, or SIOS. Currently, he's the director of the pre-Hawza program in Toronto and rector of SIOS in Qom. The topic of his presentation is the incomprehensible God of Abraham and the new agnostics. Please welcome him with the loudest of your salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الكريم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنورين المظلومين. اللهم صل. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله حنيفا ولم يكن من المشركين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in his book that Abraham was a nation, an ummah, obedient to Allah, a hanif, and he was not one of the polytheists. The title that we had sort of announced for this particular short presentation is The Incomprehensible God of Abraham and the New Agnostics, the relationship between these two ideas, these two things. Now, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is known traditionally, and he's considered to be the first monotheist who believed and who was also the first person to believe in a trinity, believe in a divinity that is singularly and supremely transcendent, infinite, absolute, but at the same time personal. So a personal God. So the idea of God being a God of Abraham, a God of Ishaq, a God of Yaqub or Ismail, and so on. This is mentioned not only in the Quran in numerous places, but also in the Bible as well. لقوله تعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, in an ayah where Yaqub is about to pass away and he's speaking to his sons and he asks, what will you worship after me? And they respond and they say, نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. We will worship your God and the God of your fathers, Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac, one God, and to him we submit. So here it's the first part of now both having said that there is a God that is infinite, that is absolute. Hence from that we understand the incomprehensibility of basically the divine, the inability of a finite and a relative creature such as man to comprehend a divinity in its essence and in its totality. And this is a well-known doctrine. This is not anything unusual. It's not just Islam. All the religions speak about the incomprehensibility of the divine vis-a-vis the essence of the divine and the sifat, the attributes of the essence, as well as also in the totality of his names and so on. So that's not something that is new. The second part will talk about the personality of God just shortly, but now we want to speak about agnostics. The agnostics were spoken about, a definition was given a bit earlier. The agnostics take, though, this incomprehensibility of God that all traditions speak about, including Islam, to be an unknowability. And this is sort of the problem, that they use this and use it to bolster their arguments against the theists. And this primarily leads them to a position that is in effect a denial of the existence of God. And it's been labeled by some to be a practical atheism, right? So the agnostics, while they say that, whether it's now 99% or 1%, whatever amount of doubt they have in the existence of God, it is tantamount traditionally or classically to atheism. So they basically don't believe in God. And that is sort of the classical version of the agnostic. Now, to explain, Thomas Huxley came up with this term agnostic in 1869. The word is from two Greek words, a, which means no or against, and the word gnosis, which means knowledge. So combined together, the agnosia basically is translated as ignorance. And they see, some of them, they see this self-professed ignorance to be a genuine sign of intellectual humility. And in fact, it's famously said that Jordan Peterson said, "Who am I to say whether God exists?" You see, so humble to be able to say that, I don't know, and I'm sort of admitting that I don't know. Now, this is the classical agnostics, and as we said, their position is tantamount to atheism, really, and it always was. But there's a new type of agnostics, sort of, who are taking their cue from the postmodern world, from the relativism, the cognitive anarchy, and hence use the unknowability of the absolute, but not just the absolute, capital A, but of any absolute position. They use it to argue against even the new atheists, which we've heard about from the very first sort of bayan to, we've heard about them now a number of times. So the new atheists, the people that were mentioned, people like Sam Harris and Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens, and you can add maybe Lawrence Krauss and Jerry Coyne as well to this list. So they're against even these people. They're saying that these people, just because they are absolute in their position, where they say and they insist that God does not exist, they are radical sort of atheists, if you want to call it, and that these people are also then not like us. They're not like us agnostics. So in so doing, the new agnostics seem to escape the charges against them of being practical atheists. This is sort of one way out, where they seem to be disagreeing with the new atheists, but actually now they enter a period that we can call where they're not practical atheists, but they're practical polytheists. And we'll explain, inshallah. Under the guise of accepting a non-absolutist spiritual/religious positions that do not upset the New World Order, they promote then, because of this, they promote heterodox, heretical, and neo-spiritualist tendencies and movements. I'm going to quote from an article by a man called Ben Rutter. It's an article called The New Agnosticism, and he writes this. He says, "Such a new agnostic is a person who remains aloof from fixed religious identities while preserving at the same time a vague faith in some higher power. Agnosticism has been dislodged and its meaning lifted into flux. The forces behind this shift may derive from the need, felt dimly by those on either side, for something like a genuine middle ground. Where Huxley was suspicious, the new agnosticism offers a generous welcome. It is ecumenism, drawn out almost to the vanishing point. Any tradition, any myth, perhaps even a persistent sense of gratitude will do. This then is the modern form of so-called faith. Citizens of a plural world have natural difficulty honoring the magic and heroes of one tradition over those of another." So this is how now this new position of the new agnostics is not now atheistic in the sense of now saying and sort of arguing the position, or practically arguing the position that there is no God, but is moving to that sort of that position where it allows for other types of pseudo-theisms, of pseudo-religions to crop up. And this, in one sense, is more dangerous, because to have a position of atheism where you are against God, at least you're acknowledging God in being against him. You're saying, I don't believe in God. Right? But when it comes to then this tendency of the new agnostics, this is more an ignoring of the divine, where now anything will do. Anything can be called divine so long as it basically meets certain criteria that normally go back to the likes and the desires and the wants of the soul, lower soul of the human beings. Now, to respond to the incomprehensibility and how it's misused by whether it's now the atheists, the new or the old, or the agnostics, the new or the old, this is what we can basically respond with, and this is we have to be very careful here in understanding the difference between incomprehensibility of God, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the unknowability. There's a fine line here, and please, inshallah, pay attention. The finite can never comprehend the infinite in its totality, obviously. The relative can never understand the absolute in its essence, obviously. But man can know God. Why? Because there is something that is commensurate between man and God. And that is the divinely inspired spirit intellect. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blew into man something of his spirit. This is that commonality. And this allows for the knowledge of God. And hence we have, in the tradition, the Islamic tradition, we have reports in the hadith and amongst the ulama and the urafa of terms such as wusul ilallah, the idea of reaching God, liqa Allah, the idea of meeting God, the idea of ru'yatullah, the idea of seeing God. If it wasn't possible to know God, we wouldn't have these reports. This is one sort of way of explaining it. The other way, as we try to do, is to say that no, intellectually, there has to be a point of commonality, and that is the intellect, that is the spirit intellect of man. So we can know him, but not in his essence. We cannot know him in that way, but we can know him in his acts and his attributes. In the Nahj al-Balagha, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Alhamdulillahi al-mutajalli li khalqihi bi khalqih. That Imam Ali alayhi salam says that praise be to Allah who is manifest for his creation through his creation. So definitely he is manifest and he can be known, aside from now the essential way that Sheikh Rizwan spoke about, the third way, the third of the two. The other one that he spoke about in terms of the signs in the afaq and in the anfus, that once again these are ayat, and these have to do with the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can know him in that way, and it is possible to know him, but not completely. You cannot know him in his totality, and it's impossible to know him in his essence, including even for the highest of Allah's creation, even for the Anbiya and for our Nabi that know that he cannot know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his essence. And that knowledge itself, that you can't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his essence, is also a great knowledge for those who understand, inshallah, the consequences of that. So that had to do then with the incomprehensibility. The new agnostics also see God's personality as anthropomorphism, thereby implying the primitive and childish character of the Abrahamic religions, and hence the relativity of their absolute God. The response to this is that God's personality pertains to man, who is a person, as the recipient of God's communication, and hence basically his relevance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in speaking to man, has to speak to him as a man, as a human being, and hence has to speak to him in a way that is comprehensible to him and that defines what a person would be, a personhood would be. And it has to be in human terms. It has to be through human beings. And it's only the Anbiya that Allah speaks to, in one sense, directly. But aside from that, this is now, if you don't understand this, then you're limiting God, in fact, and you're not giving him his full measure. لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ وَمَا قَدْرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ إِذَا قَالُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَى بَشَرٍ مِّن شَيْءٍ. They have not measured God his rightful measure when they have said, Allah has not sent down to any human being anything, right? That they haven't measured him. So in other words, in trying to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is important that you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does send down, does communicate, he does condescend and come down to the level of the human. He must, because he's all connected and he's all present. When I arrived just before the Salatul Jummah from abroad, right after I went to a Salatul Jummah with the Sheikh Kamil, I'm going to quote. It turns out I had sort of chosen this ayah on the plane to speak about. Turns out that he also spoke about basically this ayah. I'm just going to quote basically what the Sheikh said, and as a much better explanation than I had actually prepared. He said, why Why is this now, this ayah, quoting the ayah, they have not measured God in his rightful measure when they have said that Allah has not sent down to any human being anything? Why? Because rationally speaking, by definition, God must be infinitely above the minuscule scale of the human being. It doesn't make sense that such a being, so transcendent, so tremendous, can communicate with something that is next to nothing. But Allah has said they have not measured God his rightful measure. Why? Because he is omnipresent, and he is omnipresent with his complete totality in all places. There is nothing large, there's nothing small, nothing near, nothing far with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is omnipresent, and he is omnipresent with all his presence. And therefore, to communicate with all his creatures, even with the ants, or even lesser, or whatever, is easy for Allah. There's no obstacle to that. The moderns don't understand the nature of supreme intelligence and the supreme being. So it's important then, that is very important, that we understand then the importance of what we call the second principle of our usul ad-din, nubuwah, and we say then the third one is ma'ad, and so on, that we understand that we're not talking about apples and oranges here, that nubuwah comes from the principle of the divine. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his omnipresence and his connectedness to all things and his relevance to all things in a manner that is appropriate for everything. That's really important. So this then is the God of Abraham, eternally present, close and connected. Fallahu al-wali, as the ayah says, that he is the al-wali. He is the one who is near to all things, connected to all things. So we are not to seek to be connected to Abraham, though, just now by blood and lineage. Now we all have connections. We claim to be Muslims. We claim to be Muslims because we are born as Muslims. Christians to a lesser degree, Jews to a greater degree, where they consider themselves. And all of us, as Ayatollah Jawadi said, if you were paying attention this morning, he said that he is our father. He called Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam as the father of all of our father, quoting the ayah and also the hadith about that. So now the patronage here, the paternal sort of connection, is not just because of blood and lineage, but it has to do with reality and practice. And I'm going to, because it pertains more importantly to the Jews who claim now this connection with the father of the monotheists, and they claim this connection through a biological and through lineage, a biological connection and lineage. I'm going to quote just two verses of the Bible. In the first verse of the Bible, this is from Luke, 3rd chapter, verse 8. John the Baptist says, "Do not begin to say, 'We have Abraham for our father.' For I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise up children to Abraham." Right? That is, it's not a matter of being connected. Even these stones can be the children of Abraham if God so wanted. Jesus, this is in John chapter 8, verse 39, Jesus said to the Jews, "If you be the children of Abraham, do the works of Abraham." That's how you gain that connection with Nabi Ibrahim, the first of the monotheists and the father of the muwahideen. From the Quran, قُلْ صَدَقَ اللَّهُ فَاتَّبِعُوا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Say, Allah has spoken the truth, so follow the creed of Abraham, a Hanif, and he was not one of the polytheists, of the mushrikeen. And this also was mentioned, and once again in the message of Ayatollah Jawadi, where he said very quickly, very briefly, but he said that we have been told to do the ittabi'u Ibrahim, to follow the millah of Ibrahim, the creed of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we're going to end now with this, that if we want now to be a monotheist, if we want now to be believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way where we are pushing back against the atheists, the new and the old, the agnostics, the new and the old, then we have to be connected to Nabi Ibrahim and this tradition of Tawheed, where it's made relevant through the line of Nubuwah in a real way. So I'm going to give basically two examples, well, maybe one, because unfortunately I was told that we could not take this offline and it's online, so I will have to only give one example. The first example is to not be affected by the new agnosticism, we must acknowledge Nubuwah in a real, living way, not just a concept, and not just the law in the books, the Sharia and the fiqh, and so on. A lot of importance was given and is given, yes, to the ahkam, and it should be that way on a certain level, but as we go forward, with the entropy increasing, as Sheikh Rizwan was pointing out, that there are things that are more essential than sort of concentrating on the pedantic sort of details of the law. So we have to acknowledge Nubuwah in a real, living way, that as a human presence. And this is the idea of walaya that you've heard about now a number of times. Sayyid also Suleiman also mentioned that. And the idea of now being connected to the Nabi through a chain. You have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Anbiya are the Anbiya Allah. They are the messengers of Allah. They're connected to Allah and hence speak the truth. They gain the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have a vision of Him. They know Him in that closest way. The closest way that you can know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they know Him. And then they pass on that knowledge to then people who come after them. To whom? Well, obviously the awsiya. And we heard about that just now from the Sayyid. And then after that, the awliya and their students, their companions, and so on. So basically, you have then a chain of starting from the Anbiya, student, teacher, and student, and so on, and he then becomes a teacher, and the student-teacher chain coming all the way to us. And this then is how we can understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is omniscient, and He reveals and teaches, and the prophets now also, who in turn, to teach their sort of awsiya, and we said it comes down all the way to us. So the nature of knowledge, the nature and tradition of ta'lim and tarbiyah, which we've heard about in Islam, is essentially an oral tradition. It's not a written tradition. It's an oral tradition. There was a statement of Allama Tabatabai. A friend of mine was there when this question was asked of him as to what is the nature of ta'lim and tarbiyah, the nature of education and edification in Islam. He said this one simple sentence. He said that izanu bezanu, sine be sine, nafas be nafas. In Farsi, he said it is to sit, basically knee to knee, and it is sort of breast to breast, and nafas be nafas, breath to breath. And that's not something else. Guess what? How much time do I have? Oh, okay. I didn't even look at the clock. Alhamdulillah. So we're just ending here, inshallah. So this implies that modern academia, no matter what its sort of benefits are vis-a-vis access to knowledge, and by the way, with modern artificial intelligence, that sort of access to information and putting together information in sort of packages and systems, that is something that is probably becoming irrelevant. Does not have and represent this attachment to the truth and so on. So this is important then for us as a path to God. If you want to be able to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the way to do it then is to be connected to people who are connected, and to sit and to be humble and to knee, and to basically spend time learning. If you are not right now on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis, you're not sitting at the feet of an alim who has himself sat at the feet of other ulama, then you're not really being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not on the path to God. This is what this means. This is what, in actuality, is what it means. All of YouTube channel and all these things you may have access to, and the books and this and that and the blogs, they're of no good. Because the real knowledge is this idea of the oral tradition, and there's an aspect to it, a mystical aspect to it, that is beyond just words, beyond just sort of, knowledge in its discursive sense. So inshallah, with the prayer that all of us seek out, and if you truly seek, Allah is the guide, Huwa al-Hadi. He cannot not be the guide, and He will guide. If you're truly seeking truth, if you're truly seeking knowledge, then Allah will provide that for you. You have no excuse to say that, we were seeking, but Allah didn't provide. No, that's not possible. So if you're truly seeking, Allah will provide, insha'Allah, a way in which you can come into the physical presence of, insha'Allah, an alim, a mu'allim, who has himself learned, and he's in a continuous chain, goes back, insha'Allah, to a ma'asum. So this is the real life sort of, bottom, how can we say, the basic way that we are all invited to, and we all must be involved in. If we're not, then we stand the risk of giving in to these sort of influences of agnosticism, the new and the old, and other forms of misguidance. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala tahirin.
Ahsantum. Thank you, Sheikh, for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to ask Dr. Khalili to come up and moderate the Q&A.
Thank you, Professor Hussain. Thank you, Nabil, for chairing that so graciously. Please let's express our appreciation for Dr. Nabil Hussain with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Well, we are almost at the end of our journey together. We have a few things left, and I'm happy to say that if our speakers from the last panel thought that their day was over and they could rest now, they are sorely mistaken, because we now have, that's right, we have the Q&A session. So, as I said before, our speakers, they're here fi sabilillah, so they're here for thawab. But as we all know, if we want thawab, there has to be imtihan, there has to be a test, there has to be bala, there has to be tribulation. And so I'd like to invite our three distinguished speakers, Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza, Sheikh Rizwan Rashid, and Dr. Sayyid Zaidi to return to the stage. And can I also request Sayyid Ali Imran to return to the stage from the earlier panel, because we had to unfortunately shift that Q&A. And so he will be returning to the panel as well. And if you remember, he spoke about education. So please welcome our four speakers from today back to the stage with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He's gone to the end? Oh, I thought he wasn't even until 6:45. He's left early. Okay, but unfortunately, Sheikh Rizwan has had to go, but that just means that the remaining three speakers will get not only his share of thawab, but they will get his share of imtihan as well. So we have to make the questions at least 33% more difficult for the three speakers. Thank you so much. What's easier? Oh, yeah, anywhere. Sharaf al-makan bil-makin. Okay, so same format as before. If you could line up behind the microphones and start sending your questions online. I have my trusty tablet here. So just to remind everyone of the topics that our speakers discussed, Sayyid Ali Imran was on the morning panel. He spoke about Muslim school teachers' perceptions of tarbiyah and its implications for professional development. Dr. Sayyid Zaidi spoke about the Brethren of Purity's conception of God, taking a classical turn there. Because sometimes, the classic is the best, just like Coke. And then we have, Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza, who drew our lectures to a close with the incomprehensible God of Abraham and the new agnostics. And I have to say, I did find it quite incomprehensible. I'm just kidding. It was very insightful. Thank you, Sheikhna. Just doing my thing up here. The caffeine is wearing off, and I have to keep myself awake somehow. So we've got questions lining up. So can we start with the sister side, please? Sister, if you would like to come forward to the mic and ask your question. You may need to turn the mic on and just tap it to see if it's working.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم My question is a bit layered. I have two, but I'll ask one, and inshallah we have time for a second. For my first question, we've focused so much on the existence of God equating to a believer. We've come to this conclusion together here today that if we can only get the youth to believe 100% in the existence of God. And I want to introduce a thought that it's really not enough. Because when I examine the Quran, when I examine the shaitan, the heart of the shaitan knows God exists. Not 99.99%, 100%. There's no shadow of a doubt. He knows God exists, and yet he disobeyed. From my perspective, and from what I've been reading, what I really want to know is it not the case that a heart that knows the existence of God 100% without a shadow of a doubt and disobeys is far worse than a heart that chooses simply, foolishly not to believe?
To volunteer, we can have multiple answers from the panel, so yeah, go for it. Dr. Zaidi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking if it's not worse that for a believer to sin than a disbeliever to deny the existence of God. Am I correct?
It's the disobedience. So a heart that knows God, he or she knows that God exists. They've gone over the hurdle. In the same way that shaitan knows, in fact, more than most, he's certain God exists, and yet he disobeyed. So that heart, there's something about that heart that is far worse than a foolish heart that doesn't even believe in the existence of God.
I think my initial response would be that the person who may claim to be sinning still may recognize that God exists and everything that he or she may be doing, and just needs to turn back and realize why they are doing what they're doing. Whereas a foolish person who doesn't believe is living in really their own irrationality, I would say. But that's just my own stab. I think I failed that imtihan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. With regards to the foolish person, perhaps doesn't believe in God, if they're not intent on disobedience, if they don't have a takabbur, a sort of an arrogance like the shaitan did when he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that person may seem like they're disbelieving in God, might even say they're disbelieving in God, but actually they have a type of belief, and hence that's what you're getting at intuitively, that such a person is better because there is an underlying acceptance or acknowledgement of God, and sort of what you're calling in their foolishness, they are not believing, sort of what Ayatollah Jawadi, he calls it jahalat amali, that the person knows, but their intellect knows, but their will sort of makes them to not follow the consequences of what their intellect knows. So yes, such a person generally is better than the person who knows but disobeys, in a very knowing way, in a way where it's on purpose. That's definitely the case. Shaykh Mutahari mentions this possibility in the last part of the book of Divine Justice, where he speaks about good works from non-Muslims, people who are not believers, but they do good works. And he holds out the possibility that yes, even though the person may be saying with their mouths that they don't believe in God, but it's because perhaps he says that the God that has been defined to them or has been defined as God is not something they can believe in. And actually, in their heart of hearts, they do believe, especially if we're assuming that they're doing these good acts. They're good people, fair people, and they're doing these acts not for any ulterior motive, not for any gain, but they're doing it for something that you can't put your finger on. Well, then that's probably, he says, the light of God in their hearts. So it's possible that you have people like that, yes.
Thank you very much for that. So what we'll do, since you have a second question, sister, and you are still at the front of the sisters line, we'll come to the brothers' side, and then we'll take a question online, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay. So, oh, you're here too. Okay, so if possible, perhaps we could alternate between you. Thank you for Uncle, you were very patient with us last time, so it's only fair. You should get the first stab from the brother side, please. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. I do have a comment and a brief recommendation, but first of all, before I do that, I want to thank the Simcoe World Federation and ICAIR for the organization and all the knowledge that has been shared with all of us. As far as the comment is concerned, this morning, Sheikh Vinay mentioned about how in his first 10 years preaching and dealing with students, he went by the books, but his message was not well taken. And then until he found out that you had to find the root cause of the deviation and then how you tackle the problem. I have spoken to him about it. I am in the medical field. And I told him, yes, you don't treat, you have to establish the diagnosis first. So I have spoken to a few other alims who are here right now, and the way I see it, a lot of the professions, after the students graduate from the school, they do get an internship program. Teachers go through what's called practicum, lawyers go through articling, and doctors go through residency program. I really believe that we are going to produce a lot better quality religious scholars if we have a formal training program after they get their degree. So I think it has to be formalized from the Hausa or from the university. Once the alim gets his degree, they go and spend another maybe 12 months. Doctors spend 4 years in residency training. So maybe the alim can spend 1 or 2 years under the sponsorship of some other experienced alim to acquire practical ways of dealing with issues. And this will make life a lot more practical and hopefully give the right message to the, I'm more concerned about the younger generations. So hopefully with the proper advice, proper way of dealing with them, our alims who are graduating will be far more effective in that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. Is there any elaboration from the board, or should we move on? Okay, so there's a question online. I think this is perhaps one for you, Sayyidina. How can we facilitate godliness for youth when Islamic schools are out of reach for those struggling financially and the increasing use of paywalls by some scholars? So I think this is sort of a question about access to knowledge. Is that something you could elaborate on? Yes, I'll reread the question. So how can we facilitate godliness for youth when Islamic schools are out of reach for those struggling financially and the increasing use of paywalls by some scholars?
I mean, this is not a, Muhaddith Nouri in his book Lu'lu wa Marjan, where he talks about scholars charging money, and he condemns them a lot. and he says that scholars charging money can cause insincerity, but he doesn't leave it off of that, and he ends that chapter by saying, well, there is a communal responsibility as well in ensuring that the ulama, the schools, for example, the topic that I was speaking about, schools, they have the financial support and the financial resources, and honestly, it's a matter of really lifting the understanding of our communities in terms of knowing where they need to prioritize the funds, the resources, not speaking about any specific community, but when you look around North America, in Europe, and even in Australia, places where money is going, if you were to give those resources to a scholar, for example, they might, allocate it a little bit differently than the way maybe someone in the community does. Even recently, I was speaking with some of the educators in Australia, and they said to me, I'll just share, they said, Sayyid Ali, you will never be successful in Toronto with an Islamic school. And I was like, why is that? He's like, because the directors and the boards, they just don't want to invest in the teachers. They just want to invest in new technology and whatnot. So look, it's a community responsibility, it's a communal responsibility. It does require a little bit of humility as well on part of the community members to kind of seek the guidance of the ulama. Where should funds be spent? Where do they believe it is appropriate to prioritize some of these resources and stuff? So it's not a one man's job, or one person will give a solution for this. It's a communal responsibility. Inshallah, we're working towards it now with all these discussions that we've had today. Inshallah.
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive answer. Sister, Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dr. Saeed A. Zaidi and Sheikh Shuja Al-Mirza, as I awaited my turn, I reflected upon both your answers. And alhamdulillah, by the mercy of Allah, I wanted to just share a consolidated thought about that I had studied, that a believer of Allah that sins and repents and changes their ways through taqwa and ikhlas, Allah forgives them wholeheartedly, especially if they sin 3 times and repent. And it just made me think of what Dr. Zaidi said, and Sheikh Shuja Al-Mirza was alluding to about the foolish heart and whatnot. And I just wanted to leave that reflection there. Principal Saeed Al-Imran, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm an educator myself and a counselor, so I have a lot of respect for what you said, and I waited all day to ask you this clarifying question. So alhamdulillah, by the mercy of Allah. You left us off with something profound. You left us with a statement from the Holy Quran that Allah says to teach is a calling from God. And right before that, you were pushing the fact that you believe more professional development must be done for educators in the Islamic school, on tarbiyah, to have a consolidated curriculum almost. And my question to you, to unify what you said before that and after that, there must be some sort of structure, I agree, like a template, a blueprint almost, but we still would like to have the educator empowered to be a leader as well, to find their leadership style, as you know, teachers, as your principal, mashallah, by the mercy of Allah. So do you see potentially room for that in this structure you're thinking, where creative educational leadership can be embedded within this professional development of tarbiyah?
Alaikum salam. Thank you, sister. I'm sorry if that's how my point came across. It wasn't meant to sound contradictory. When I talk about professional development, so I have already created a couple of modules in this regard, and I can see some of my staff was present here as well. When I talk about professional development for teachers for Islamic pedagogy, what I'm talking about is, for example, imagine some of the presentations that were given today about God and secularism, and imagine a Muslim teacher at a school had a very rudimentary and basic understanding of that theology. Would that not impact their classroom? Imagine if they had a a little bit deeper understanding of the Day of Judgment? Would that not have an impact in her or his classroom? Definitely it would. That doesn't contradict or conflict with the autonomy that a teacher herself or himself has in the class. For example, at our school, teachers have very different backgrounds. They bring their own experiences, they bring their own lived experiences from their backgrounds, their countries, the struggles that they went through, and they're able to share those experiences in their classroom setting, but within this overall holistic framework. And that's what I was kind of basically alluding towards and pointing towards. I bring my own experiences from Iran, and I've actually become a storyteller at a school. People who I was generally condemning, but I'm considered a storyteller because there's so many stories that I tell in the classroom. But as I said, it's linked within that holistic framework, and that's what I was alluding towards. Yeah.
Thank you very much. On the brother side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I had two questions. One was planned out for Sheikh Rashid, but unfortunately he left. So if any of the speakers on the panel could expand
Sorry,
on this.
if I could ask you, just because we only have 2 minutes left and there are two of you, so if you could possibly ask the second question, and then if you can ask your question, then we can ask the panel to respond to both so that we don't leave anyone out.
Okay, so since Sheikh Rashid isn't here, I'll just go to the question for the speaker.
Thank you.
Okay. So this question for Sayyid Ali Imran. So basically just I want to understand your evaluation on your case studies that you did. Were those views that the people that you interviewed, were they ultimately consequential or beneficial in a way? How did you perceive them? Would you consider them outliers in a way? So how beneficial are those understandings when discussing this model of tarbiyah? In terms of how you mentioned integration of cultural norms. So seeing as a Islamic society, integration of cultural norms might be seen as a good practice, might be encouraging in a way, albeit with its limitations. And another thing you mentioned was the concept of dissatisfaction, how a group of people came, they were dissatisfaction with the present educational system, therefore they had a drive to create an education system to, further, the youth. So that narrative kind of pushes, I don't know, as per your studies, I would just like to ask, would that result in more passionate results? Would that be more efficient?
I think I got your point. I'll address it quickly. The paper was me just presenting a problem statement that this is a problem. Mm-hmm. I didn't necessarily give a solution beyond just saying that, look, we need to think about this and we need to develop some sort of a program, some sort of a structure. What that looks like in our specific context, in, let's say, to be honest, when you're in education, even one school from another school may look very different, but what that actually specifically looks like, that's something that we have to research and work on. So I think I'll talk to you about this afterwards. I'm still here. Maybe if the brother has another question for the shuyukh, we can go to those.
Thank you. And last question. You have the honor. No pressure. No pressure.
I cannot remember the verse exactly, but the one that refers to people, أنهم يحسنون صنعا, they think they're building good. And with this pluralistic world that we're now entrenched in, how are we able to gauge ourselves when relating it to the other verse of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, الذين يستمعون القول ويتبعون أحسنه. What is al-qawl? Is it everything or is it one thing? How can I find objectivity? How can I access that truth when I am unable to even know my own intentions? How can I begin to judge the intentions of others? If Allah has created everything to return back to Him, for Himself, for His own thing, how can I pass judgment against others when everything will return back to Him, whether in a base form or a high form? And He's the one who يُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ. He's the one who will raise and fall. I think maybe my point has been made. I just don't know sometimes how to gauge myself. And if you can shed some light on that.
Thank you for that.
I think you ask a very good ethical question, mashallah. And I think I would begin with saying that because especially in Islam, Allah Ta'ala created us to be good with the intention of us being good. Like, unlike Christianity, we don't have a concept of an original sin. It's very different. We have to assume good intentions. That's just the intention we have to assume, until we are given proof that there was a bad intention. And of course, I would like you to remind you of the famous story between Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, where Sayyidina Musa was not aware of why Sayyidina Khidr was doing what he was doing until the very end. We're not prophets. We're not going to ever know why somebody else did something, until they explain themselves to us, if they even do, and if they give themselves a good explanation. I may say something to you now that may be accidentally offending, and I didn't mean to offend you, and you may be taking it in a way that might be offensive. But at the same time, I might not know that I might be offending you until you tell me, or I might figure that out. So I would highly recommend to assume good intentions. But that's also not to mean that you should be silly. That doesn't mean you should sell yourself short. Because we are living, unfortunately, in a world of dhulm. Just look what's going on. From every corner of the world, there's a war going on. So we can't be silly at the same time. But Allah Ta'ala has given us aql, He's given us intellect. He's given the word aql both means reason and intellect, just like in the Greek, nous means both intellect and reason. We have to use both of our intellectual and rational faculties, follow the Quran and the example of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhi salatu wasalam, and try to assume the best until we are proven the worst. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much to our distinguished panel of speakers for sharing their time and their knowledge with us. That brings us to the end of this question and answer session. So can we all please show our appreciation for Sayyid Ali Imran, Dr. Sayyid Zaidi, and Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I suppose the real question I should ask is, what do you think? Have they suffered enough to receive their thawab? Thank you. Thank you, all of you. That is a Buddhist concept. Okay. So this brings us to the end of our final panel and to, I'm sorry to say, to the end of this conference. We've been on quite a journey together, and there are just a few things left to do. So those of you who were following our advertising, you may have remembered that we had a photography competition. So at the same time as we were advertising the conference, we also sent out a photography competition inviting people to submit photos on the theme of faith in modernity. This was the first time we'd ever run a photography competition, so we weren't entirely sure what sort of response we were going to get, but I'm very happy to report that we had some truly beautiful and inspiring and thought-provoking submissions from the community, both in Toronto and worldwide. And the ones you see here are the shortlisted photographs from all categories. So we had two categories. We had the under 18 category and we had the over 18 category, and we received entries for both. And as you can see, I'm just gonna let these play for a little while. You can see there's some really incredible visual explorations of the theme of this conference, because that's what we wanted to achieve through this competition. We've got 2 solid days of verbal communication, of talking, of learning through words. But I think, one of the great things about Islamic civilization, and all civilization actually, but I think one of the defining things of Islamic civilization is the visual arts. For example, when you go, when you go to the Middle East, and you see the different architectural styles, whether you go to sort of Syria and or Egypt and you see the Mamluk architecture, or you go to Iran and Central Asia and the subcontinent, you see the Persian architecture, you see this incredible visual language being used to convey a religious message. And that's what we wanted to inspire today. Now, obviously, we sort of thought long and hard about how we wanted to do this. And we settled on a photography competition simply because almost everyone in the world today is walking around with a fairly decent camera in their pocket. And we all take photos constantly. Like, I know many people in this room have Instagram accounts because I've seen your follows on the ICAIR Instagram. And thank you for that, by the way. Do follow us on social media. And so we thought, what a great way to engage people with the theme of God in the modern world by asking them to communicate their understanding of God in the modern world in a visual form, in a homage to the visual element of the Islamic tradition. And these are the entries you can see going through. So there's just one thing left, which is to announce the winners. So for those of you who don't know, in each category there were two prizes. There was the runner-up prize and the winner's prize. The runner-up prize was 200 Canadian dollars, and the winner's prize was 400 Canadian dollars. And I have to say, it was an incredibly difficult competition to judge. By the way, I wasn't the one judging it. I have no idea about art or photography. I just do the nice words. But I am fortunate enough to know some really talented photographers and visual artists. So we had about 5 or 6 people vote and rank these photos and sort of give them scores in various categories. And then we just asked ChatGPT which is the best picture. But so it gives me great pleasure to announce, first of all, the under-18 runner-up, Sukaina Virani. And what we asked our artists to do, because they are artists taking these beautiful photographs, what we asked our artists to do was to submit a short brief or a short abstract about what this image meant to them. And this is Sukaina Virani's abstract. And I'm not going to read it all out because we're quite short on time, but I just love how she relates the visual register of nature in that photo, this beautiful natural photo, with the signs of God. And connecting, again, this is because when we talk about God in the Islamic tradition, of course, we talk about God having signs and ayat. And I think a lot of these photos manage to really bring home this idea that God is present in the world through his signs. And so, congratulations to Sukaina Virani, our under-18 runner-up. Can we please recite a salawat? I'm hoping that when we get to the winners, the salawats will get louder. Thank you. I know we've been practicing that, but don't worry. For next year, wherever we are, you guys make sure you do loud salawats at home so we can hear you at our next conference. So now, as for the winner of the under-18 category, it goes to Kazim Ratansi with this beautiful shot of the eclipse. I believe this is from the recent solar eclipse we had, and his briefing is beautiful. It's very poignant. He says, the most unfathomable of Allah's astronomical signs in the greatest of Allah's months. And I think to say any more, okay, well, you guys really brought it out for the winners. Just remember, there's one more of these to do, so keep some energy. But yes, so congratulations to Kazim Ratansi for winning the under-18 category in our photo competition. Please recite a salawat. And now we move on to the over-18 category. And by the way, when I say the over-18 category, we had entries. When I say over-18, we had entries from the full age range. We had entries from people in their early 20s all the way up to their late 60s. And I think there is truly a latent talent in the community for the visual arts, and something that actually we need to nurture. So for the over 18 runner-up, congratulations to, keeping you in suspense, Kazim Zaveri. And this, I mean, this picture really does show us the idea of faith in modernity, as we have a young man reading a copy of the Quran on the metro. I don't know which I don't know if this is the Toronto Metro or this is the Toronto Metro. Thank you. We have expert confirmation. This was shot on the Toronto Metro. We now have to find the exact carriage and preserve it. But this is, I mean, this is a beautiful shot, and I really, you know, sorry. Carriage 110, I like it. MashaAllah, we're getting very wilayati towards the end of the day. So Kazim Zaveri, congratulations, our over 18 runner-up. Please recite a salawat. And finally, for our over 18 winner, oh, sorry, and here is, sorry, this is quite a lengthy abstract. What we will do is we will share these on our website. But for our over 18 winner, many congratulations and felicitations go to Farhan Sheikh for this beautiful composition. I think this really, I think when you say this person understood the assignment, you know, that you get the sense of what I mean. We have the Holy Quran and various sort of you know, Islamic resources displayed on digital screens, but in a very spiritual setting. You know, I think the composition on this one, sorry, look at me, I've been listening to my photographer friends, using words like composition. I feel so artistic right now. You know, this is a beautiful piece, and I think it captures the essence, the dichotomy that we've been discussing in this conference, how to be authentically faithful while also living in the modern world. And so, can we send our congratulations to Farhan Sheikh with the loudest that you can manage? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now you can see, yeah, we have our volunteers who are just setting up some glass awards, because what we've been doing is we've actually been ranking all the speakers and deciding which ones are best. No, I'm just kidding. I can see, I saw panic looks on the faces of some of our guests. Others were strangely confident. But yeah, no, we have some glass awards that we'll be giving out to thank our speakers. However, I think it's also important to give a vote of thanks to everyone who's been involved in this before we close. And I've actually spent this afternoon vigorously writing out every name I can think of, you know, who's been involved in this journey that we've been on. Because, as we know, according to the famous teaching of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that whoever has not thanked the creation has not thanked the Creator. And so I feel that you know, there is a huge debt of thanks owed to so many people. I hope that I've captured as many as possible in my list, but I just want to apologize from now if there is anyone who I've left off this list. I want you to know that is my shortcoming, that is my limitation, and I want you to know that your efforts have been appreciated. And I would just ask everyone here just to take a moment, just a few seconds, to send a quick dua for everyone who contributed to this, no matter how small a contribution. If it was giving someone a lift to the mosque so they could volunteer, if it was holding a door open for someone to come through, let's just send a dua and ask Allah to increase their tawfiq and their barakah, and to guide us all to the right path. Salawat. So this conference has been the collaboration between many organizations and many sub-organizations, actually. This could not have happened without the generosity of spirit and tireless dedication of the JCC. I want to say thank you to the president of the JCC, Rizwan Khalfan, who has been, who from day one has been our strongest supporter in making this conference happen here in Canada. He's been so enthusiastic. He has extended everything we've asked for. Rizwan has said, "Don't worry, we'll get it sorted." There hasn't been anything that we've needed that he hasn't stepped up to provide. And a special thanks, an extra special thanks go to him for facilitating our scholarly roundtable at Emmanuel College on Friday, which was just such a brilliant experience for all of us, myself, the ICAIR team, and all of our speakers, and I hope for our colleagues at Emmanuel as well. I also would be remiss if I did not thank Muntazir Bhai. I don't know if you're in the hall, Muntazir. I see you. I see you at the back. Muntazir Bhai has been getting phone calls from me at all hours of day and night since he was introduced to us as our point of contact here, and just asking him about the setup in the hall, catering, capacity, all sorts of things. Like any question we had, Muntazir has been there for, and he's the guy. Every request we had, he said, "Don't worry, we can take care of it. We're used to doing this. You can trust us." And honestly, Muntazir Bhai, you guys have over-delivered. We could not have done it without you. So thank you so much. Equally, I am sorry that I only met him when I arrived, but Mukhi-sab, so Mehboob Bhai, you are a force of nature. I mean, really, just such a blessing to the community. I never saw him sitting down. Mehboob Bhai, I don't think I saw him standing still for a moment. He's like, he's like a fereshta. He's just moving from place to place, kind of making things happen. And that energy is infectious. I see it through the whole community. I see it in all of the volunteers. So thank you so much to your Mukhi. You're really blessed to have such an energetic heart of the community. And I cannot thank Mehboob Bhai without also thanking Madam Chairlady. Zara, thank you so much. Like ever since we came, we talked about the catering. You've been taking such good care of us. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, the catering for Emmanuel College, just your expertise and the great love and passion you have for serving the community really came through. And honestly, I think you've ruined food for all of us. Like we are going to leave Toronto now, and there's just nothing will compare. And can I just say, the nihari was really, I don't know who made that, but just a special thanks to whoever cooked that nihari. It was wonderful. And I also want to thank the ground team here. I really want to thank the ground team at JCC. I've seen you all kind of working in the backgrounds, from the car park volunteers, the people doing setup, carrying chairs, laying out tables. These two young lads here sorting out the awards. Just everywhere I look, I see youth from the community. I see members of the community just working really hard to make this event happen for no other reason that this is something they believe is going to help their community, and that's something beautiful. That's really fi sabilillah. So just thank you so much to the ground team and all the volunteers at JCC. I'm going to come back to the AV volunteers in a minute to thank them along with the AV team. I also want to thank Nasimco because, the JCC, we were introduced to the JCC by Nasimco, the regional federation. I want to thank all the members of Nasimco who we've been dealing with, who've given us advice, guidance, and just helped us understand the North American context. Because we're based in London. We Brits, we don't understand North America, but Nasimco have been especially helpful. I want to thank the president of Nasimco, who unfortunately couldn't be here, Arif Jaksi. I want to thank the Nasimco Secretary General, Al-Hajj Muhammad Arif Jagani, who was here yesterday with us. I especially want to thank Sister Shifa, and I would really be remiss if I did not thank Sister Fatima Kako and her entire family, who I've seen here just working away. I can see her working right now at the back of the ladies section. Again, that's someone else I don't think I've seen sitting down once during my whole time here in Toronto, so thank you so much. Then I want to thank the WF team. I said at the beginning of today that President Safdar Jaffer, Hajj Safdar Jaffer, has been our biggest supporter, the biggest champion of scholarship and research for the benefit of the Shia community, not just the Khawaja community, but the Shia community worldwide. But that enthusiasm and that support extends to his whole team. I want to thank all the office bearers of the WF, but there are a few in particular I want to single out for mention. I want to thank the Secretary General, Arif Ali Herji, a very dear friend, and again, a huge supporter of us. Like whenever I have a problem and I call Arif Ali Bhai, he solves my problem. He's like, I do tawassul. I think I do tawassul through him. So thank you. You're such a blessing to us to have in our corner. Thank you. I also want to thank the Assistant Secretary General. I want to thank our Assistant Secretary General for all of his support. He's been Ali Jawad Bhai, you have been just an indefatigable supporter from day one. Like, I mean, he couldn't join us here in Toronto, but in London, like, he would come and help us put out chairs at our events, and he's always been there for us, always getting us the resources we need, giving advice, support, encouragement when things seemed hard. He's always there for us. I also want to thank Dr. Munir Datu, the vice president of the WF, who is always keeping me on my toes. He has been a source of advice and feedback to us, and has also been at all of our events in London, and I really wish he could have been here with us in Toronto. I want to thank the whole Secretariat team as well for all of their support. The unsung heroes, I think, of all Khoja organizations are the Secretariat. They make the magic happen. But I want to say a special thank you out of all the WF departments and sub-departments. I want to thank Marcoms. So Sabra Juma, Fatima Sughra, who is over there, and all of the design team. We would not have this conference without you. Everything you see here, all of the banners, the PowerPoints, the displays, these booklets, these have all come from our Marcoms team, who are so dedicated. We were up, all day and all night in the run-up to the conference getting this literature ready. So a big thank you to them, and a special thanks to Sabra Juma, who tried to be here but was defeated by war and flood. And honestly, I believe, I believe that she could have made it if it wasn't for the flight cancellations. She's, her determination is, again, another force of nature there. So thank you, Sabra Bai. I also want to say thank you to our AV team. So Shahid Ali Kaki, who's been in the back, in the AV room, managing this whole thing. All of these beautiful transitions you see on video, the management. Yeah, he's sending me a message now on the screen. So I want to say thank you to Shahid Ali Kaki, who hasn't been sleeping. I'm a little bit worried about him, so please send your du'as. But he's Ya Ali. Thank you. I also want to thank Miqdad Somji, who's been supporting us all the way from London with getting things ready. Again, Miqdad is a big supporter of ours. I also want to mention some of the AV volunteers we've had here. Can I just say thank you to Mohammed Raza Badwani, Ali Amin Kermali, Shabir Rashid, and Mubin Moladina for not just helping with the AV, but helping with the setup. We could not do this without you. I also want to thank our ICAIR board members, some of whom were presenting here, Said Suleiman Hassan, Sheikh Ali Dina, Saras Ali Zargar, Owen Hassan Ali. I also want to thank again Sean Jaffrey, who couldn't be here unfortunately, but they've done a wonderful job. I also want to thank the ICAIR team. Ali Mehdi, who you may have seen with an earpiece, he's hiding out in the corridor because he doesn't want me to call him out, but Ali Mehdi's been running around tirelessly making this happen. This is his first conference. He's just done such a fantastic job helping manage the speakers and so on. I want to thank Zainab Hassan, who's been helping from Dubai and has been, just working. By the way, Dubai is like 7 or 8 hours ahead, so she's awake right now, dealing with the social media, not sleeping. And I just want to say thank you to Zainab. We couldn't do it without you, and we wish you were here with us. Finally, I just want to say a thank you to all the families and children of those who've been contributing to this conference. It's been a lot of late nights, long hours, and a lot of stress, and thank you for sharing your loved ones with us and letting them contribute to this. And thank you to the audience, because without you, well, there would just be no point to this event. Thank you to those of you who came to Toronto, who stayed for the full 2 days. There are some people I know by face now, just like I know the imams, not by name, but by face. But I know you because I've seen you in the audience day in, day out. You're turning up, you're in every panel, you're paying attention most of the time. Just thank you to you, and thank you to those of you who've been tuning in at home. The view counts on our socials have been absolutely astronomical. Thank you to those of you who are following us. That is a great way to support our work. And thank you to all of our donors and supporters. Some of you have been chipping in as little as $5 just when you've been reserving your tickets. I can't tell you how heartening that is. It really means a lot that you're supporting us. And finally, can I just say once again, thank you. If anyone I've missed off this list, thank you to all the shuyukh in Toronto who came out in support of us, some of whom have been here today. Thank you to all of the dignitaries who came and supported us, especially on the first day. Thank you for all of the people who facilitated important conversations. Thank you to all of you who contributed. And finally, and this is the last thing I will say before we move on to the awards, thank you to the Imam of the Age, to the Prophet, and most of all, thank you, God. Salawat. So finally now, we just want to acknowledge some of our speakers and the people who've made this happen. So if I could ask President Haj Safdar Jaffer to join me next to the podium, where we'll be giving out awards. Could I just ask the photography volunteers to come forward and help document this? And we will call people up to give them their awards and take some photographs. Yeah, if you come over here, perhaps. So if you actually come and stand in front of the podium, then you can be so we can have you on camera as you're giving the awards. Yes, that's yeah. If you stand on this, if you come and stand in the middle here. So I'd just like to start. Let's start with our speakers, and. Sheikh Arif Ali Hoji, you please come up as well. So we have a full house up here, the full deck of cards. Thank you so much. So in no particular order, can I ask Professor Arn Hassan Ali, can I ask you to come up and receive your award, please? I'm not sure where Arn is. He is here somewhere. I think all the Nara Haydaris may have told you. He's trying to hide at the. I can see some. Ya Ali. There was a great attempt by some of our speakers to hide themselves at the back of the hall, and so now I'm afraid we found you. Your nur was shining too brightly. So can I ask Professor Arn Hassan Ali? Thank you so much. Please say a salawat. Allahumma salli ala. And someone else who was trying to hide with him, can I please ask, dear respected Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza, please be ready to come up. And if I could ask the speakers just to line up to form a, Professor Owen, could I just ask you to line up over here, please, on this side? Yeah, we're gonna do a line. And everyone has to shake everyone's hands. Sheikh Shuja Ali Mirza, thank you so much for your contribution to the conference, and thank you for making it back. Ya Allah. And could I ask Sheikh Dr. Muhammad Ali Ismail, please come up. Thank you so much for your paper and your contribution and for your continued support of the work that we do. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now could I ask another Torontoite to come up? Sayyid Ali Imran, thank you so much, not only for your paper, but thank you for coming back to do the Q&A, and thank you for all your hard work in educating the children of our community. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next, could I ask a fellow Londoner, Sheikh Dr. Saeed Subhani, please go. Thank you so much for your paper on the teleological argument, and thank you for your continued support and enthusiasm for ICAIR. We look forward to working with you in the near future, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now can I ask Professor Nabil Hussain, please come forward and receive your award. Thank you so much for being here, for chairing, and it's been great getting to know you over these last few days. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now, a man who's been responsible for more than one Nara Haydari in this hall, could I ask my dear friend and colleague, dear Sayyid Zaidi, please come forward and receive your award. Thank you for your enlightening paper on Ikhwan al-Safa and all your support of ICAIR. We look forward to working with you in the future. Salawat. And now, can I please ask another local of Toronto and someone who has been a big supporter and advisor and guide for us from the beginning of our journey at ICAIR, and I hope that he will continue to be. Sheikh Vinay Katia, please come forward and receive your award. Thank you so much, not just for your paper, not just for chairing, but thank you for that tour of Emmanuel College. We'd have been lost without you. Salawat. And now can I ask someone who traveled a long way to be here and who, it was the first time I was hearing speak in person, and honestly I was really blown away. And I think it's all the more important to recognize outstanding female scholarship in our communities. Alama Razia Batul Najafi, please come up and accept your award. Thank you so much for being here with us and inspiring us, and thank you for coming to Emmanuel College where you spoke so eloquently about the importance of tawassul. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now someone who's already on stage but was also a speaker at the conference, Sheikh Arif Ali Herji, please stay where you are to receive your award. Thank you so much for the very thoughtful paper you presented, and thank you also for being such a big supporter of ICAIR. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now I just want to acknowledge a few of our speakers who couldn't be present. Some of them have already received their awards, but others we will have to find a way to get it to them. Sheikh Rizwan Rashid, who I think strategically left so as to avoid receiving an award. Thank you so much. Dr. Mehjabi Dala, Dr. Hawra Al-Hassan, Sheikh Habib Bazahir, who really wanted to be here. Thank you for all your efforts to get here. Sheikh Afzal Murali, Dr. Mustafa Mubahadi Far, and of course Sheikh Dr. Murtada Ali Dina, who again really wanted to be here, but sadly circumstances prevented it. Also, thank you, a big thank you from the bottom of our hearts to Ayatollah Jawadi Amali. We ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to preserve you and to increase your blessings and your tawfiq, that you may continue to be a blessing to us. Please recite a salawat. And then there's a few more people that we'd like to call up. Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi, who unfortunately couldn't be here but delivered the video address. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about sending it to him because he will come to the award eventually in the fullness of time. Please recite a salawat for the preservation and continued energy and good health of Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi. Now, I can see some people in this hall who perhaps think they're safe from being called up because they didn't deliver a paper. I'm sorry to tell you that is not the case. We are quite ruthless here at ICAIR in how we express our gratitude. And so can I please ask Brother Rizwan Khalfan, please come up and receive our thanks. I see he strategically avoided us. Oh, very smart. Okay, so we will fortunately we will have the award waiting for him when he returns. Ali Mehdi is going to be lying in wait in the car park to ambush him. We'll catch it on camera. Can I ask though, someone who I know is here, Muntaza Jafar, the Director of Operations here at JCC, please come up to the stage. We could not have done this without you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And honestly, I think everyone here at JCC deserves one of these, but unfortunately, the glass factory called and they ran out of glass. I think it would also have been quite difficult moving that amount of heavy objects. Salawat. And can I also ask Muhammad Arif Chagani, the Secretary General of Nasimco, please come up to receive your award. I see. I'm noticing a pattern here. There's some very smart people. But the list isn't over. So there are a few who aren't present. Sabra Juma from Marcoms, Fatin Ali, also from Marcoms, you aren't present. Zainab Hassan, you aren't present. Can I just say though, Fatima Sughra, you are present. Please come up and receive your award for all your hard work, all the work you've been doing on the ground. Thank you so much. Salawat. Where's your one? Now can we have, and I think there's one person up here, who really deserves to be acknowledged, and I've acknowledged him a few times today, but I feel, once again, thank you for all of your support. President of the WF, Al-Hajj Safdar Jafar. Salawat. Ali Mehdi Namjiani, get over here and receive your award. Salawat. So Ali Mehdi joined ICAIR just a few months ago. This is his first time running an international conference, and I have to say, I'm a little worried for my job. I think they might not need me anymore. He's done a fantastic effort, and thank you so much, Ali Mehdi. I think that's all of the awards. If there is anyone's left, no.
I have a question. Are you also going to be getting an award?
No, definitely not. That's not happening. No, there's really. We're having sound issues up here.
A loud salawat for Sheikh Alex.
Oh. I couldn't leave Toronto without at least one nada. Thank you so much. And now can I just ask everyone who's received an award, please come line up. We're going to arrange you so we can have a photograph. That includes you, Fatima Sughra. We have a photographer here. So if we could get... And Alima Zaki Batul Najafi, if we could have you back up here for the group photo. And Ali Mehdi, come on, you have to be in the photo as well. Come on, everyone, there's no exceptions. Can the photographers please give us some guidance on getting us all in frame? Like, how do you want us to stand? So, if everyone can, shall we do 2 rows? Thank you to all of our speakers. Can I just say there's actually one group of people who I want to thank specifically, because I just remembered them when I looked to the back of the room and I saw the tea table, and I found myself wondering, is there tea there? there are some people who are the real energy, the real driving force behind this conference, and they are the kitchen volunteers who've been keeping us fed and, most importantly, caffeinated for 2 solid days. So can we please send a loud salawat for our kitchen volunteers? And I'm afraid that's all the time we have. It's been wonderful being here at the JCC with all of you, sharing in this conference, participating with you in this conference, benefiting from the knowledge of these scholars. And I think that we've addressed a lot of questions. I don't know how many answers we found, but I do know that we've opened a really important conversation. And I think it's important that that conversation continues. And what I hope is that from this conference, we will continue to learn and to grow and continue to have these conversations to address the challenges of living in the modern world. And finally, I would just like to end with the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, that in the ikhtilaf ummati rahma, fi ikhtilaf ummati rahma, the idea that in the comings and goings of my ummah, in the search of knowledge, there is mercy. So thank you all for being a part of the mercy that we had here today. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Salawat.